My guest today is Ken Westin, a seasoned thought leader in cybersecurity who has spent years analyzing and understanding the intricacies of cyber threats and the methods behind them. Ken has a unique ability to identify emerging trends in the industry and for figuring out how businesses can protect themselves before they fall victim to attacks. Previous to his current role, Ken was the Field CISO at Panther, where he developed workshops and delivered them around the world. His career also includes significant contributions at Cybereason, Elastic, and Splunk, where he drove security growth, developed innovative tools, and shaped industry conversations on cybersecurity. Ken has been a key spokesperson in the industry, frequently quoted in the media, and featured at major conferences like Black Hat and DEF CON. Ken recently joined the team at LimaCharlie as a senior solutions engineer with the intent to use his deep expertise to help organizations build robust security strategies. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me on the show today, Ken. It's an absolute honor to have you here and to have you on the team at LimaCharlie.
Thanks, Chris. Gosh, you make me sound pretty awesome there. Thanks for the intro.
As far as I can tell so far, you are pretty awesome. So I don't feel like I'm stretching it too much. So
yeah.
So I'm always curious about how folks got into technology and how that led to a career in cybersecurity. What was your path like? Were you into computers as a kid, or is it something you picked up later in life?
Yeah, definitely later in life. I was always kind of a nerd, but more of a book nerd. So I always was reading a lot. I had some learning disabilities that affected my ability to handwrite. So I'm a little dysgraphic, form of dyslexia, and wasn't diagnosed until later in life. And then I was given access to a computer, and all of a sudden then I could communicate, and it kind of was changed the world for me. So for me, a lot of times I think computers represented a freedom for me, allowed me to also be really creative. Finally, people could understand what I was saying when I was typing it. Programming was just an extension of that, especially like graphic design and, web design, things like that, all things I've done in my career. So I'm pretty lucky to be born when I was to have access to computers, because it really has changed my life in a lot of ways.
Awesome. Do you remember what your first machine was?
I still have the processor for it. Hold on. I'll hold it out. Yeah, it's in this cube here. It was a Pentium 2.
A Pentium 2.
Yep. Yeah, it was my first real system that I actually built myself, and I was pretty proud of it. So when I gutted it, I still saved the processor. So.
Oh, that's great. How much RAM did it have?
Oh gosh, I don't even remember.
Like megabytes, or were we at a gigabyte?
Oh, we're talking megabytes still.
Yeah. My first machine had a 20 gig hard drive, which at the time was like
that's huge.
The Skookum. Yeah. It's funny though. I kept having to delete things so I could download more stuff from. I think LimeWire was the thing at the time. So yeah. And then along the way, you founded a company at some point. You did the founder's journey. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, with technology, I sort of stumble into things. Like someone actually asked me, like, how do I get into cybersecurity? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm trying to find my way out. It's like I sort of stumbled into it like a closet, and I got trapped here. But yeah, I was just really interested in technology. I think I'm lucky and fortunate enough to just sort of get curious and follow my passions, and ended up making a career out of it. So I was involved in a lot of web design, web development, got into application development. I graduated with a degree in English literature, but I took all the free classes they offered for web design and web development, and that's kind of what I got more interested in. But then ended up being a webmaster at a university at Pacific University, and you got free tuition. So I took all the computer science classes I possibly could. Actually ended up being an adjunct professor while I was there, and I went for my graduate degree. So I kind of did the graduate degree more just because I wanted to teach, because I really loved it. Mm-hmm. But I found my own company when I was working with this one company. I started playing with USB-based malware. And at that time, it was they actually had a tool that would block it, so you could install it on your servers, and people couldn't plug in a flash drive, or only approved devices. And I got really curious about some of those tools. I started looking at, this is neat. Like, gosh, this hacking stuff looked really hard from the outside. Trying to access a network and all that stuff, that seems like a lot of work. But with a flash drive, I could just get inside of a network. I could plug it into a computer. I could deploy all sorts of malicious malware. I could steal information off of it. So I did kind of a lot of research around it, and even built a website called usbhacks.com, where I was actually talking about these tools and publishing them. That was the first time the FBI contacted me, actually.
First time.
They're like, what's this about, Ken? And I had to explain to them, it was about raising awareness. And I said these tools are available in these underground forums. I ended up educating them quite a bit about some of these tools as well. But then from that, I found kind of white hat approach to this too, where I could take those and actually use them more for theft recovery. And I had this startup where it's called Gadget Track, where we started doing theft recovery. And I even had a six-figure deal with a company called FLIR, where I actually embedded some of this technology into their cameras that were being used for theft recovery, but also to help with export controls because they're not supposed to be in certain countries, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It allowed them to kind of keep track of them.
Are those thermal imaging cameras?
Yeah, thermal imaging cameras. Like, it was the weirdest thing. Like, I offered this service for free, and I put it up on Dig, and then I had over like 20,000 people sign up for it. On the agent, I had sort of a way of actually tracking what type of a device was being connected. So I sort of kind of crowdfunded it because I had a whole list of like GPS devices, iPads, MP3 players, the make and model of all the devices that were supported with this method. And FLIR was one of them. And they actually tested it. And then they approached me with this. And from there, I said, okay, well, I think I have something here. And I quit my day job. And that freed me up to focus on building newer technologies, like approaching new ways for recovering stolen laptops, got into mobile phones as well. And also then ended up helping a lot with the investigation side as well.
Very cool. And why didn't you continue on that path? It seems that you abandoned ship at some point.
Yeah, it was really hard. Again, for me, it was a lot more about having the freedom to be able to, explore technology and get creative with it. That's kind of what I was kind of thought that this would be like, and it really wasn't. I started raising funds in Oregon, Portland at the time. I raised almost $1 million in funding. I was able to hire some people. But man, it's like running a business really takes you away from the technology in a lot of ways. And it took me away from my passion, and it kind of turned me into someone I didn't really like. And then we also struggled. There was a company called Lookout that came out, and they got like $30 million in funding. I'm like, in the Bay Area. I'm like, there's no way we're going to be able to compete with that. Yeah. And I almost went bankrupt. I left the company, and probably the worst one of the worst moments of my life. But then I went to go work at Tripwire. But all the stuff I learned, like, it came with me, and I rose up the ranks really quickly. I had a lot of press contacts, so every time there was some sort of a major breach, like Sony at the time, like Bloomberg reached out to me. I ended up being a talking head there because I can explain, exactly how it happened in a clear way that people can understand. And yeah, so it sort of helped me kind of realize, hey, this wasn't a total waste of my time and resources. Man, I learned quite a bit from it. And I also have a ton of appreciation for startup founders. That's why I like working at startups. I think now, I don't think I'd want to be the lone founder again. Man, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Yeah. It's a huge burden. But working in startups again, like, having that kind of freedom to explore and be creative, build new things. That's what my passion is.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And it's not for the faint of heart. That's for sure. It's a bumpy road. You mentioned creativity a couple times, and I know you have a thing for guitars. In fact, I can see a whole bunch of them behind you right now. I want to say 7, but I'm sure there's more hiding. No, there's like more on the side. There's probably 15. How long have you been into guitars? How do you start, and why do you keep going? It seems like you've got a lot of other stuff to do.
Yeah, like I always loved music, and so I think around when I was 12, I wanted an electric guitar. My parents bought me one. It was this cheap Hondo Strat copy. I took lessons and I stuck with it. My parents also thought it would be good too because my dysgraphia helped with playing guitar and things like that. Helped kind of build that coordination.
Sure.
Worked really well. And then I ended up doing well with it. Kept at it. My parents bought me a real guitar. I still have it. It's a Gibson SG around here when I was 14. 1989, I think, aging myself. And then I really stuck with it, and I started playing in jazz bands in high school. A couple of bands that I played in high school. And then I ended up joining a band when I was my senior year in high school. Bunch of guys that had just graduated college. And I ended up moving in with them, lived in the garage. Some of the best years of my life. And we still play together. We have a gig here in a couple of weeks So we
Awesome.
still do 1 or 2 gigs a month if we can, if we're lucky. How awesome is that? You get paid, you get free beer, and you get to hang out and play music with your friends.
Yeah, no, that sounds
It's the
great.
dream.
Maybe we can play one of your songs on the way out. You got something you'll give us the rights to play?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I got something I can give you.
Okay, that'd be really cool. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's awesome, man. I'm glad you have that. I tinker around a little bit, but never was super serious. So I do see the pleasure in it. I just don't have the long history, I guess. So yeah, you've spent years understanding the mindset of hackers. How would you define the hacker mindset, and what sets it apart from other problem-solving approaches, in your opinion?
I think when people think hacking, I think one thing they always think about it is very technical. Oh, you're a hacker. Can you fix my computer or whatever?
Yeah.
But I really think hacking is about creativity. It's about understanding technology and then sometimes using it in ways that were never expected. And I think hacking isn't just computers. I have a lot of friends that are artists, that are musicians, that are writers. They approach things in a different way, and I consider that a hacking mindset as well. I think innovation, like if we didn't have hacking, there wouldn't be any innovation, right? We always kind of stumble into this stuff. Sometimes it's by accident, sometimes through inspiration. I think I have the ability to sort of connect dots that other people don't see. I'm not sure if it's, from the neurodivergence with, my learning disability paired with ADHD, things like that. But I definitely approach problems in a different way, I think, than other people would. I rarely go head on. I usually find like the side channel attacks or, there's got to be a way to gather this information. And from that, I built things that people didn't think were possible. Tracking the stolen laptop using Wi-Fi positioning. No one had really done that before. Activating the web camera to get a photo of the suspect, right? Thinking about, how can you integrate different technologies and different components to solve problems in a different way that, people haven't really approached it before.
What role does like persistence or tenacity play in this? Does that have to be present in a hacker to be successful?
Oh, you mean insanity? Yeah, very much so. Yeah, that's the thing. I think, particularly with the ADHD, the rabbit holes.
Yeah.
I remember I was working on some stuff where I was mining XF data, and it was one of those things where I kind of got something to work, and then, I went down a rabbit hole. I think I went 3 days without sleep.
Yeah.
Just banging on this, kept going at it, and I think there definitely is something there. It's like, there's a possibility that this can work, and you kind of bang your head on it a few times. Like if you ever look at my code, it's like who wrote this? Like,
Yeah.
But I'll get things to work, but
Yeah.
none of my code is going to be used in production. I'll just leave it at that. But you can get things to function, you get things to work. A little bit of different languages, a little bit of this and that.
Yeah.
So it's not always about having all the answers right away, but being able to figure it out. I think that's a really critical part of hacking.
Yeah, we totally share that quality as well. I'm very good at getting stuff to work, but yeah, you probably want to keep my commits out of production. In continuous learning, is that just part of the curiosity, or is this something you have to be conscious of as you move along in your hacking career in technology?
I think so. At least for me, I learn. I think it's also why I like teaching workshops, because I don't learn well just like theoretical. Like here's a book and these concepts. Like I really need to be hands-on. People talk about like the VAC approach to learning, so visual, auditory, and kinetic. It's like I kind of really need that. I learn better by someone giving me a problem and then letting me go figure it out. I think one of my best managers I ever had was at Cybereason. Most patient manager I ever had, but he had a very extensive background in red teaming and offensive security. He never gave me the answer. But what he did do is kind of guided me towards where I should look, which I appreciated so much more, because now I kind of know where I can go to look for researching this type of problem. Would give me general hints and things like that, but would never give me the direct answer. And I think I learned more from that than I would have, even from any sort of book that's out there. So.
Sure, you probably pick up lots of peripheral information while looking for the one thing you're looking for too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Do hackers collaborate and share knowledge? Is that a big part of how you build yourself up?
Oh, that's huge. I think the myth of the lone hacker that's in the basement, like the Mr. Robot that's like super guru genius,
the hoodie on.
Yeah, that's all a lie.
Yeah.
If you think about it, like So you'll see sometimes people, they'll take an offensive security class and they get all arrogant. They think they're super hacker. And then you have to remind them, okay, well, what are you using for your hacking? Oh, Kali Linux. Okay, which is Linux. Did you realize that, who built that? That's a larger community. How about all those tools that you're using? All those exploits, all those vulnerabilities. Think about all the people all the work that's gone into that, right? So I think, again, the idea of the lone hacker is a myth. I'm lucky enough. I have a ton of friends. Like I go to DEF CON and Black Hat and other conferences, and it's just like a big like high school reunion. It's a love fest. Like we don't even like sometimes go to sessions. It's like hallway con. We're just there catching up with each other because that's the only time we get to do it and meet in person, right?
Right.
And that's like the happiest time I am to be alive, and just to be surrounded by people that are so much smarter than you makes you want to do better.
Yeah.
So I'm really fortunate to have a lot of really good friends that are a lot smarter than me. And I learn from them, and they always make me want to do better.
I love that. Yeah, and that's actually, I also love that about cybersecurity is there's so many super intelligent and interesting people with different backgrounds all sort of focused around the same thing. It's really cool. What are the most recent innovative or surprising hacking techniques you've seen in recent years? Is there anything that surprises you, or is it just more rehashing of the same stuff?
I think ransomware, like I know it's kind of a big issue. Everyone hates it, but I mean, the fact that it came about is brilliant in a lot of respects. And if you actually look at it, like sort of the evolution of it, right? The hackers are always trying to find ways to make money.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do a lot of research in like stolen credit cards and point of sale malware and things like that. And once that kind of got shored up with better fraud detection, better technologies to mitigate it, this sort of ransomware started. And it didn't start with big businesses, right? It started targeting like
small,
your grandparents and things like that, or, on LimeWire, like applications, trying to get a little bit of money from some of these people. But I think they got frustrated with it the same reason that we get frustrated with trying to do tech support for our parents, trying to explain to them like here's how you're going to pay me in cryptocurrency. Like, what's that?
Yeah.
Right? They're not getting a lot of bang for their buck. They're actually doing work, and it's costing them, maybe they get $1,000, but it's taking them 10 hours to do it. Right.
Yeah.
So the evolution into sort of the larger entities, when you started targeting larger enterprises and things like that, if you really look at like the ransomware economy, like the initial access and a lot of it mirrors sort of legitimate businesses, right? It's really amazing how this sort of evolved and some of the innovation that they had to do to make that happen. Sometimes I'm not even mad. I look at them, it's like, okay, like that's frustrating. You're a bad person for doing this, but I can still appreciate sort of the technique and some of the technical aspects that go into that. And I just think it's amazing that ransomware has become such this big issue for us, and it's been such a great moneymaker. I mean, that and like business email compromise is another one. I worry about AI. I think like being able to replicate people's voices, and you can do videos and things like that. We're already starting to see that now too. The ways that these sort of cyber criminals glob onto and leverage these technologies. I think that's why I love cybersecurity. It's a cat and mouse game, right? So we learn from them, they learn from us. So.
Yeah, I had a guest on the show recently, George Gerchow. Sorry, George. And he was at a talk where he was saying they had people, as they were walking in, they filmed them, and then they were able to deep fake them live on the screen like several minutes later, just to show how easy it was to copy somebody's identity online now. So
yeah, the cool thing at DEF CON, they had it, DARPA had a thing where they were actually doing deep fakes, and then the DARPA folks are trying to detect it using some of the automated detections and things like that. And they even had cameras set up so you could do your own fake news thing. It was really cool.
Yeah, we're all going to need secret phrases soon, right? That you only exchange in person, and then when you're online, you can know the other person's who they say they are.
Everyone's got a passkey.
Yeah. So with so many different technologies available today, what are the go-to tools or technologies that hackers tend to rely on most? I know you mentioned Kali Linux, which is like the big blue book of cybersecurity app. Is there new and more exciting things out there?
Like there's, it seems like a lot of the tools they keep evolving. Like a lot of the like open source, in general, I think is great. One tool I use a lot, like it's a friend of mine, David French. He wrote it. It's called Dorothy. It's a neat tool for testing Okta adversary emulation. I use it pretty heavily in a lot of the workshops I ran at my prior employer. I thought it was a really great way to test some of the tools. So I think that, along with things like Atomic Red Team, I really like the adversary emulation tools and approaches. And there's even some for AWS and things like that as well. I like it because you can write your detections all day long, but until you actually test it in more real world scenarios, you're not going to be able to see, okay, is this going to generate false positives? Is it actually going to identify when I do something malicious? I like running, attacks on infrastructure and then looking at the log myself. I always like to see, okay, well, how can we maybe detect this better? I don't like to always just rely on every detection that other people write. I actually want to look at it myself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the adversary emulation tools really provide that capability.
In reading logs is a special kind of talent.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of patience for sure. Yeah. I mean, especially when you have so many of them.
Yeah. I could never. I can't. I just get lost. It just glazes over for me to dig through that stuff. So with the evolution of cloud computing, IoT, and all the other modern technologies we're seeing, has this changed the game? Are there specific vulnerabilities in these new areas that are being exploited more frequently? I know IoT is sort of infamous for having poor security.
Yeah, I think like IoT, there's the industrial aspect of it, which is a concern, critical infrastructure. But I think one thing that's overlooked is people's houses. I actually was on a TV show a few years back where we actually got to hack a smart home. We had 24 hours to get in. We cracked the Wi-Fi password very easily, just doing some authentication stuff, and we were grabbing the packets, and then we sent it off to a cloud cracking service. I got the password back, and I looked at it, and it was a phone number. And I did a Google search for it, and sure enough, it was the target. It was his cell phone number that he has published on his website. So I could have saved a couple $100 just by doing a little bit more of a cent on that. But once we got into the house, I used the Wi-Fi Pineapple. I was able to get all their devices to connect to it. And then I looked at sort of the default passwords for those devices, and everything was set already to the default password. So I had access to the security cameras. I had access to the TV audio system. They even had a system for cleaning the toilets. So I was sitting there flushing the toilet. And then what they did was they had a party that night, and we got permission to mess with them. So we're sending in creepy Mr. Robot voices and telling them that we hacked them. And I was displaying, I took photos of all the people that came to the party with the security camera. I actually posted all their photos on the TV.
Oh wow!
And there's all these things you can do, with that. There were limits, I couldn't get I could have gone, into their computers and things like that, but that was out of scope.
Yeah.
But that was sort of an eye opener for me, is that think about that. Everyone working from home, particularly executives. Now, why bother trying to hack into the network when you can hack into their home? If you can gain access into their computers and things there. I think that's where we see information stealers. I think we see a lot of supply chain attacks and things like that, where we see it with GitHub in North Korea, targeting developers at home. And I think we're going to see a bit more of that. And I think that's something that's been overlooked in the industry.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because you could just sit outside in a car with a pineapple, force everybody to disconnect from their network, maybe get them to auto connect to yours. And yeah, wow, that's pretty interesting. That even reminds me, I think in Detroit recently, I just heard that it's a second article I saw where home invaders, like people who were doing break-in and entries, as they came up to the house, they just jammed all the Wi-Fi so that the Nest cams and the different cameras that connect through Wi-Fi just shut off. And
you can buy those online, $200, and you can have one of those and disables Wi-Fi, cellular services, within 10, 20 meters of the house. So that's pretty scary stuff.
Oh, it does sell too. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Same mechanism, I guess, like a connection kind of.
Yeah, they have all-in-one. Maybe I should say this, but there's all-in-one devices that you can buy. Okay. I don't own one, but I've seen people purchase them.
Yeah.
And it's, even though they're incredibly illegal, it's not difficult to acquire.
Sure. Yeah, we won't be linking any Amazon items in the show notes for that one. So social engineering remains one of the most effective tools. Again, we've seen this in the Okta hack and in some of the big ransomware at Caesar's Palace. Why do you think it's still so successful, even though we have all these technological advancements and mechanisms in place to prevent this kind of stuff? What makes people so susceptible?
I think it's sort of like why zero trust was, sort of this sort of dream in security, right? Because it's all tied around identity. You can protect machines all day long, but you still people still have access to systems for work. And oftentimes it's not just their laptop; it's like their cloud services, trying to get access to code repositories, and things like that. So I think that's primarily why people are still going to be the target. They're always the weakest link. I've even done sort of experiments where, if you could trigger an emotional response in someone, some of the reason goes out the window. So all of the phishing that you've done for them, like if it's something that they can trust, or you send them a bank alert or something like that, and then you incite fear. A lot of that logic goes out the window. And then even if you have phishing training, every month, there's people are still going to fall for that. I think a lot of us in the security community, we've fallen for phishing links. I know I have. I've even had a situation where I got malware installed on my Mac. It's embarrassing, but it happens. And I think that's why attackers are aware of that. Targeting individuals using social engineering, it's always going to be a key target. And then leveraging AI with synthesizing people's voice, things like that. I've had to talk to my parents about that, right? How often is that? Like, I feel like you gotta, it used to be your parents would sit you down and have a talk. Now I got to sit my parents down and have a talk about, safety on the internet.
Yeah.
That's a totally different world now.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned AI. We've mentioned it a couple times already, actually. How do you think hackers look at stuff like that, like emerging technologies? Are these tools? Do they see them as tools, potential, or things to overcome?
I think a little bit of both. I mean, I think, with the AI, it's funny is that we always dream that AI is going to be this sort of bring in the cyber utopia, where we're going to be, free to play guitar and, do art and things like that. And no, what's happened is like the AI is being used to do art, and it's crappy art and writing and things like that. And it's not very good, right? It's sort of mediocre content, right? And so, like that's kind of one part of it, but it also has introduced a whole new realm of security vulnerabilities. Data models can be tainted. You can see a lot of the prompt engineering, injection attacks, things like that. There's a whole new sort of world of security tools that are coming out, like Hidden Layer, right? That came out of Cylance, where it was from an attacker that is actually able to bypass some of the EDR detections that they had with machine learning by sort of normalizing a little bit different behavior, and kind of skewing the baseline, and then they were able to circumvent it. And so that's where they saw the need for this. So I think there's a lot more sort of AI security tools that are going to come out as a result of that as well. And then, of course, it all comes down to the data. I mean, data scientists, like 90% of their time is just massaging and cleaning up the data. And what do they also do? They're collecting more data to feed into these AI systems. Probably more data than they probably shouldn't collect it. How are they securing that data, right? Yeah. And oftentimes they're not, because most of the money is going into the AI stuff. We got to get this to market as quickly as possible. Yeah. Security is sort of an afterthought, right? And then now that information can get compromised. You find underground markets, and then you start to see hackers are also using these same technologies. They're using LLMs to create rich profiles of individuals, put a social security number in and a name, and we can get all sorts of information, possibly even browser history and things like that on an individual. Yeah. That's sort of horrifying, really, what the future is going to bring with this.
Yeah, you make a good point. I pose the question as like, what kind of, is it a tool or an opportunity or a challenge to overcome? But it's also introduces a whole new class of vulnerabilities. Like I was thinking, I saw a talk on prompt injection, where people were feeding images with prompts written in them into somebody's AI, and it was interpreting them as a command and overriding the initial design of the system, which is just wild, right? Sorry. So when it comes to staying one step ahead, what do you think motivates hackers to continually push the boundaries of the technology? Is this just the innate quality of the person that happens to be a hacker, or is it something else?
Money. Yeah, I mean, it's it's the root of all evil, right? Yes. But it really is, I think. But once I think that's how ransomware really has become a gold rush for cyber criminals. First off, most of the people that are doing this are living in countries where there is no extradition treaty with the U.S. The U.S. financial system is just an open target. even critical systems, hospitals, all that stuff. There used to be some ethics around it. Not anymore. If anything, and a lot of times, like in Russia, it seems the patriotic activity that they can be doing. But once someone is successful with a new attack and it pays off, there's going to be a gold rush. They're going to allocate resources. They're going to build it out. Like I talk a lot about, ransomware as a business, and some of them are even VC backed, like by, so these oligarchs, right? They invest money, and then they have, software development life cycle that rivals some of the companies you're going to see in Silicon Valley. They have partner programs. They have good marketing. They have, everything that sort of mimics a real business. And again, when they find something that's making money, similar to what we see in the legitimate world, right? When there's a rush to AI or whatever, it's going to sort of be a black mirror, and we're going to see the same reflection when it comes to cybercrime.
Yeah, that's fascinating. VC-backed malware groups. It reminds me of, I watched a documentary on Somali pirates, and it's the same kind of model there, where the guys that actually go out in the boat to do the piracy get there because they're funded by people with financial means to sort of make it happen. It's the same kind of business model.
Yeah. Vulture capitalists, I guess.
Vulture capitalists. Oh man, that might have to be a t-shirt. Okay, so for someone trying to adopt this hacker mindset, but defensively, what are some exercises or practices you would recommend to help them see the system from an attacker's perspective?
I think a lot of today, it's really easy to kind of get into hacking. There's a lot of courses now around offensive security. I remember when I started, there wasn't a lot of that. I think a lot of people were afraid to get prosecuted and things like that, just because people didn't really understand hacking. They thought everyone who's a hacker is a criminal, and that's definitely not the case. And I think now there's so many courses that are available around it. I think even on Udemy, there's great courses. There are books on it. But I think don't just limit yourself to doing the hacking and the offensive stuff. You really need to learn how to set those systems up, how to really set up like a Windows network, how to I've done that with workshops. And sometimes it's harder to set up a network that's vulnerable, right? I had to disable Defender, disabling all these different tools so I can get in and show why you need to be able to protect yourself and things like that. So I think understanding sort of that, you then know what tools and mechanisms are in place that make some of those systems secure. Then you get creative about how to go about disabling them. So I think you really need to sort of understand the systems that you're targeting. You can't just jump into it. I know people that have been pen testers, or they say they're pen testers or red teamers, but they couldn't go in and actually configure an Active Directory or set up a database themselves, right? And that's too bad. I think the more you kind of get your hands on with it, understand both the offensive and the defensive side. That's why I like purple teaming, because you kind of you don't really go. I'm not an expert in any one thing, but being able to kind of figure it out, setting up those systems, and then start to run those attacks. I think that's really helpful. At least for me, that opens up my eyes to the more real something is for me, the better I learn from it. And now you have virtual machines. There's all sorts of like cloud share and all these other services where you don't even have to have a lab anymore. You can do all this virtually and set it up. So I highly recommend getting your hands on the tools. And I think you don't have to know everything. Again, find what you're interested in, and then kind of go down those rabbit holes. Like if you're into Windows, if you're into Mac, and you're in Linux, maybe pick one. Just go out and set up a LAMP server, for example. Then think about how you can go about and attack it. Very
cool. Any books that you would recommend to anybody out there?
Oh man, there's so many of them. Oh gosh. I'll give you a list at the end.
Okay, we'll post it in the show notes. We can get it after the show. Okay, so this is the last one I have for you. It's the one I ask of everybody who comes onto the show. It can be as wide or as narrow as you want. Do you have any predictions for the future of cybersecurity?
Well, I think one thing we saw was a lot of security teams were sort of decimated with the promise of AI. A lot of vendors were saying that, hey, you can replace your security analyst with this AI, and we're finding that wasn't true. So a lot of security teams are very short-staffed right now, and I think what's going to happen is there's going to be sort of resurgence in hiring for security practitioners. I think we're going to shift our mentality of AI and cybersecurity from the sort of Android mentality that is sort of this autonomous, thing that's going to mitigate it to more of a cyborg mentality, where these tools are more of an extension of the analyst to help them do their jobs. So the more we can leverage machine learning, anomaly detection, LLMs to help real security analysts do their jobs better, they're going to be able to focus on things that are much more interesting and actually mitigating real threats. Get rid of all kind of the boring work and things like that. Assign that to the AI. But I think some of the more creative work, I think that's going to be come back to the security practitioner.
Very cool. Well, that's a hopeful one, I think. Yeah, I'd like to see more butts and seats.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Ken. It's an honor to know you. It's always great to chat with you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Chris.